let's go ahead and show 36 through 40. Again, everybody factored in on this from Warchant.com. Gene Williams, Jeff Cameron, Tom Lang, Ira Schoffel, Corey Clark, myself. It was tough. It was tough this time around, but again, it was really fun to kind of look at what they've got and what's going to be on the field for Florida State this upcoming season. So let's check it out here. Ira, again, 36 through 40. Winston Wright checking in at 40. Ja'Kai Douglas at 39. DJ Lundy, 38. Kevin Noles, 37. And I'm saying this out loud because this will also be on a podcast, everybody. So I know you all can read and see, but, we got people listening on the pod. And then Tate Rodemaker. Now, as I look at this, Ira, I only put one of these players on my top 40. How many of these players made into your top 40?
I might have had them all, buddy. I might have had them all. I had Winston.
I got your list. All right. I wanted to sell you a little bit here. Ira, you had Tate at 40. You had Ja'Kai at 38. You had DJ Lundy at 37. So those are ones I can see. Winston Wright, you had at 33.
Mm-hmm.
Strong. And then you had Kevin Noles at 29. My man.
Yeah, in the Winston Wright one, we should start there because we have him at number 40, and it's one where I think and I know you and Corey talked about it a little bit on Wake Up. He was a tough one. I mean, he's probably the hardest one to really come up with because we just don't know exactly what he's going to be. If he's the guy, if you look at statistically, he's had more success in college football than any other receiver on this roster. He had over 100-something catches at West Virginia. Had 1 year with 60 catches. Really productive player. He just missed all of last season with that leg injury. And then he did participate in the spring. He took contact. He ran full speed. But they did kind of limit him some. Like, they didn't let him do everything every single day, trying to kind of make sure he didn't overexert himself. But this position is so deep now, it's hard to know exactly. He and Ja'Kai Douglas right back to back. Those two, I don't know who ends up with more touches. I don't know. And there's a couple other guys that play their position, kind of those slot receiver types. So it's just hard to pick them. But I feel bad having Winston Wright this low. As you said, I have him up closer to 33, I think, because of respect out of what he's done as a college football player. But it's tough to know exactly because they have so many new pieces at that position.
I didn't have him on my list, so don't feel too bad about yourself, Ira. I just, again, there are so many guys out there, and I can't wait to be proven wrong on this. Like, for real, man. I really hope I look like an absolute fool with this, but I just feel like, we'll never really know just exactly what he sustained in that automobile accident over a year ago now. But I just would have thought that, when we were talking about him last season, like we were into November, and we're like, man, like, will they get him, a game or two because they can still redshirt him, get him back out there, get his feet wet. And then we talked to him. He was like, yeah, man, like I never had any plans on playing last season. And then in spring, we saw him quite limited. So I get it, man. Like 3-4 more months can really help the mindset mentally to feel and trust everything. But man, I feel like they got so many guys out there that, it'll be really kind of tough to kind of crack and get ahead of those guys if you weren't able to really be full speed at this point. But he's done it before. So certainly if anybody's capable, it's him. I mean, Ja'Kai at 39, that feels really low. I think I had Ja'Kai pretty darn high on my list. I mean, I think I had Ja'Kai at 30 on my list. I think Ja'Kai is like your sneaky, possibly number one slot receiver. I'm just trusting that kid that much. I don't have Lundy on the list, a 4-2-5 scheme, and he's your third best linebacker probably. I don't know how much impact that's going to have. Kevin Noles, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going on hearsay here. I think he was on Micah Pittman's vlog when Micah was still part of the program saying that he was going to probably be out half the season. Now, granted, once he's back in the fray, he's a guy that's been doing this, so he might be able to jump in and make some impact. And then with Tate, when you're talking about having a Heisman contending quarterback, like what Jordan Travis is going to be, I just don't know where your backup factors in. I get it. Like if Jordan misses a game or a half of Louisville, Tate comes in, he certainly will be deserving of this. But just feels like, man, when Florida State's had Heisman contending quarterbacks, those guys have been available at every single turn of the season. So I didn't have Tate on my list for that reason, but I did have Ja'Kai on my list. I'm at 30. So there it is. And if you go to warchant.com, everybody, you can see where everybody on the staff individually place those players on their top 40. But just how refreshing is this, Ira? A Winston Wright, a Ja'Kai Douglas. These guys are barely getting into the list. Whereas, I mean, gosh, seasons prior, if you had a kid that even was coming off an injury, had caught, 80 balls at a Power 5 program, even much higher. That's where we're at now, man. Let's enjoy that.
Well, yeah, I agree. I also think that, what you're seeing is that I think certain positions have been pretty overvalued, whether it's fair or not. I'm not saying it's wrong, but there's a lot of defensive linemen and probably offensive linemen, way more than 5 of each, 3 or 4 of each. They're going to be rated really high because DJ Lundy's a guy. I mean, I get it. He's a backup linebacker, but he was 5th on the team in tackles. So it's not, for him to be almost off the list seems pretty low. Winston Wright, same deal. He's had over 100 something catches. So it's going to be, I think there's going to be, we do this every year. You sent Corey and I the list from last year, and there's some picks I feel really good about. I think I had Johnny Wilson down in the low 30s, so I don't feel real good about that one. So there's always lots of hits and misses. But I think the thing with, part of its position, what's valued. And I think, Kevin Noles is tricky because, like you said, he made that comment, but I've also seen him say things on Twitter about, he's coming for it all this season and that type of stuff. So I don't know exactly what his total health situation is, but he's a guy that's been almost a full-time starter for 2 years now. So, I'm not, I couldn't leave him off the list unless I know for sure that he's not going to be able to contribute a whole lot.
Lundy really had the 5th most tackles on the team last year?
I believe so. I think 48 tackles.
All right. Yeah. My bad, DJ. I put you on the list. Sorry, man.
Well, the thing about Lundy, what's interesting about him, I've always thought this interesting because Jeff and I argue about it sometimes on headlines because he just feels like anybody at that position is not all that good. Well, I feel like he judges DJ Lundy, and a lot of people do, based on 3 years ago when he got forced into playing. When he was a freshman, he wasn't in good shape. He wasn't ready. He had not really I don't think he even played a whole lot of linebacker in high school. And so I think people still have that vision of him. I mean, I think he's a nice, solid player for them last season. Like I said, he was pretty productive. Now, some of that's probably on special teams too, but I think some of these guys I feel like maybe should be a little bit higher. But to your point, I mean, there's guys that aren't on the list who I think we're probably going to regret. One guy, you and I, Aslan, were the only 2 people that threw in votes for Destin Hill. And Destin Hill didn't make the top 40, and you and I are the only ones that had him in there. So, there's going to be a lot of – at the end of this season, we'll be able to point to some of these things and take glee and some other ones and maybe hide from embarrassment.
I had Destin at 40. You had him at 34. What do you like about – I just think physically, man, he's just so well put together. I look at him and I just see those – LSU receivers of yore, man. I see like just physically the way he's put together. I see like a Jarvis Landry, Jamar Chase. I see that kind of kid. Sam Spiegelman, who's a really great reporter for On3 recruiting wise down there in Louisiana, talked about him being one of probably the best high school receiver he's seen around there. Just feel like, man, if he can get his feet wet quick enough, he's a guy that can probably game break a game or 2 here and there. And then maybe special teams is also an option for him.
Yeah, and I think the rust factor is something to consider. But I don't know, man. I go back to, Jimbo back in the day, always talking about the easiest positions to get on the field early are the furthest away from the football. And that's why a lot of times wide receivers and sometimes cornerbacks can play because there's not as much. It's tougher if you're closer to the middle of the field. There's a lot more going on there. And, that kid had elite speed. He, like you said, he's got a great frame. He came in great shape from everything we've heard. He showed up and he's ready to go. It's not like he came in looking like a guy who hasn't played football in 2 years. So is it going to take some time to knock off some of the rest? Probably, but you have a month of preseason practice. And I just don't think there are a lot of guys on that roster that have all of his physical tools. I mean, you've got some fast guys, you've got some agility guys, you've got some guys with size, you've got some guys who don't have a lot of size. But I mean, he's a pretty rare package. I mean, there's a reason he was so highly regarded. So it's a little bit of a flyer. And I talked to some people in the business who think we're crazy. Well, we've got 4 of them on our staff apparently who didn't have him in their top 40. So I'm not saying it's a slam dunk, but I think, man, the kid's got a lot of raw ability.